Hey everybody, welcome to Monster Monday. I'm your host, DM Gallibond. Tonight we have some new music by Stream Beats, copyright free music. You can find it on all of the major music streaming platforms, as well as finding it over on streambeats.com. This is music that's created for streamers by a longtime streamer named Harris Heller. Has a huge presence over on Twitch with the Alpha Gaming channel and Alpha Gaming over on YouTube as well. So, shout out to Harris for creating this great music for other streamers to use. And without further ado, tonight we are going to be looking at Auril the Frostmaiden. All three of her forms. Yes, that's right. This is a monster who has 3 forms. Can you believe it? What does a monster with 3 forms mean? What does a monster with 3 forms mean, you ask? Well, what it means, basically, is that just when you think you are getting this monster close to being defeated, the monster rises up again and comes right back at you. And that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about tonight on Monster Monday. All right, so tonight's monster, as we said, is Auril the Frostmaiden. She's a neutral evil, lesser god of cold indifference, and she embodies winter's cruelty. Now, the DMG will give you information, divine rank, and a little bit later we're going to take a look at that and see what that divine rank is all about over in the DMG. Auril's beloved ice grasps all things in her clutches, preserving them against ravages of time. And that's one of the interesting things about her. She's a goddess of cold, a goddess of beauty. And the cold preserves the beauty. And yet, the cold makes the beauty brittle and immutable. And she's a weird juxtaposition. And there is a nice long history of this power in the Forgotten Realms, and we're going to take a look at that a little bit later. We talked about the fact that we're going to break down the stats a little bit later on, but we talked about the fact that she has 3 forms, and that's what makes this fight so interesting, because you always encounter, as a party, you always encounter Auril the Frostmaiden in the first form, and to defeat her, it's kind of like an old video game boss. You have to defeat her first form, whereupon she takes her second form. Then you have to defeat her second form, whereupon she takes her third form. And it's not until you defeat her third form that you can leave the battle, at least for the time being, alive. Because she is a minor goddess. You kill her, she's not really dead. So just keep that in mind. All right, so what is Auril's first form like? Well, here's an image out of Rime of the Frostmaiden. She's a hunched 7-foot tall biped with the head of an owl, black talons, cloven hooves, grayish white wolf fur covering her body from the neck down. And from the owl's head are a pair of curved goat horns. Cloak and cowl made of pristine white snow conceals much of her form, and worshippers refer to this form as the cold crone. And the cloak can transform into a pair of owl's wings when Auril sees fit, so that she has the ability to fly. All right, now the second form that Auril will take after you defeat the first form, uh, this is known to her worshippers as Lady Ice Kiss or the Brittle Maiden. She's a 10-foot tall, beautiful, fearsome aspect of a woman made entirely of ice and frost. Her eyes burn with a cold blue light, similar to that of liches, uh, and a thin cloak of mist forms around her. Blades of ice grow out of her body at odd angles, breaking off before they get too long. And when she moves, her body crackles. Beautiful, terrifying, mm, creepy. In this form, Arl creates weapons of ice that she uses to combat her foes. They're supernaturally resilient until Arl discards them, where they break and melt like normal ice. All right, now the third form is called the Winter's Womb or the Queen of Frozen Tears by her most ardent followers. And it's a 3-foot diameter ice diamond containing Arl's divine spark. And the diamond has facets and a sharp point at the bottom, hovers in the air, radiating an intense cold all around it. And when Arl speaks, her voice emanates from the heart of this diamond. And if Arl is killed in a third and final form, she is dead in air quotes, but only until the next winter solstice. While she is dead, her mortal worshippers lose their god granted spells and abilities, but those come back at the winter solstice when she rises again. So this is you never forget when you're fighting Arl that you're fighting a divine power. Your your best hope is to walk away from the battle alive, because you're not ever really going to kill her. And then the question will be, when she comes back in the next winter solstice, how upset is her church going to be? And are you going to be far enough away that they can't come and hunt you down? So keep that in mind if you're players and you're ever going to face a deity, even a minor deity, in a campaign. That if the DM is throwing that at you, you just might as well resign yourself that you're never going to get rid of this enemy. It's just always going to be after you in one form or another. All right. Now, because she has 3 forms, she has multiple creature types. And this is very interesting. First of all, the fact that she has 3 forms is very rare for monsters in D&D. The fact that those forms are of different monster types is even rarer in D&D. So, that first form, the one that has the owl's head and the wolf fur and the goat's legs, um, that one is a monstrosity. And monstrosities are monsters in the strictest sense, uh, not ordinary, not natural, and almost never benevolent. Of course, Auril the Frostmaiden falls into all of those categories. Not natural, not ordinary, and not benevolent. Um, and they, some of them were cooked up in wizards' labs. Some of them were a result of accidents. Some of them, like Auril, have a divine nature. All right, now types 2 and 3 kind of makes sense from the fact that she's a goddess whose aspect is so heavily uh, leans towards ice and snow. Uh, Form 2 and 3 for Auril are those of elementals. And elementals are creatures native to the elemental planes, which may give you an idea about sort of the origins of Auril, or at least it gives you a thread as a DM, something you can play with, because everything in D&D, all the rule books, you should think of those as a DM as merely suggestions. You shouldn't think of those as a straitjacket that locks you into something. Just because it tells you the history of a monster or the history of a deity. If it's your game, if you want to tweak it a little bit, you want to say, you want to attach some other types of origin story to it, it's your table, your rules, you can do that. The players don't like it, they can go play somewhere else. But you can do whatever you want as a DM. So, uh, this this is something that you should keep in mind if you ever want to take this deity out of the Forgotten Realms and put it into a homebrew campaign. Thinking about her forms as elemental forms is a little bit of license and some things that you can think about how you might be able to use that. All right. Well, here we come to one of the really fun parts of the show where we go deep into the history of the monster that we're talking about for the evening. All right. We're going, first of all, over to the Forgotten Realms wiki. And Forgotten Realms wiki has a big write up and kind of a nice summary of everything that's known about Auril. One of the really nice things is they give you a lot of alternate names. Um, that's another great resource to mine if you want to put this deity into a homebrew campaign. You can just pull out one of these other titles and use that as the name of a deity. Or maybe don't even use this deity, but just go through here and find some of the titles of things and use that as a name for one of the gods in your homebrew campaign. So, Auril is also known as a cold goddess, frost maiden, ice dawn, goddess of winter, frost sprite queen. And then there's certain people that called her Salkuruk. And then the Fae refer to her as the Queen of Air and Darkness. And she's the embodiment, or her appearance. She's always represented as an attractive human woman with blue skin, with her body being made from ice and snow. So clearly, representing her, they represent her in what D&D 5e calls her second form. She's the embodiment of winter's wrath, arrogant, capricious, and unpredictable. Yeah, well, if you were that cold, you probably would be arrogant and capricious and unpredictable too. She takes great pleasure in torturing her enemies and harassing her foes. And sacrifices and worship is not done out of adoration, but out of fear. Out of fear for the cold wind that she will drive, the ice and snow that she will use to crush those who oppose her. And in fact, a goal attributed to her is to cover the entire Forgotten Realms in ice and snow. Talks about how her divine realm is in pandemonium. If you look at the cosmology of the Forgotten Realms, pandemonium is sort of on the evil side of things. One of the upper layers, meaning it's where the lesser powers usually are. The lower layers that you go are usually reserved for the greater and higher and more potent powers. And it talks a little bit about some of the relationships with other deities in terms of their alignments with each other. One of the things that's really interesting is that Auril aligned herself with Talos and Grumsh, which those deities appear in some of the other 5th edition adventures and campaigns. If you've ever played through the Dragon of Icespire Peak, There's worshippers of Talos that feature in that particular adventure there. And then she's also part of the deities of Fury, along with Malar, Umberlee, and Talos. Um, but uh, eventually later on, you find out that Umberlee grew jealous of Aural's beauty, and so she pulled Grumsh and Talos into an alignment to oppose Aural, and that's sort of what eventually led Aural to be sort of outcast into the frozen wastes and the most remote and coldest parts of the Forgotten Realms. Um, there's some information in here about her worshippers, and of course, the great thing about this uh, Forgotten Realms wiki is that there's all kinds of other tangent articles. So you could go and you could look at the Church of Aural. So if you wanted to take this as a deity for a homebrew campaign, you kind of have a template of all of these different things that you can use within your own game. And then there's holy days in the Forgotten Realms calendar here. There's different places where there are temples and some specific notable temples. And of course, you can go and find out more information about them. And then there's also some particular worshippers, including, not surprisingly in 5th edition, a character that shows up in a couple of other campaigns, Artus Cimber. Artus Cimber shows up as somebody that's opposing the frost giants trying to get the Ring of Winter in both Tomb of Annihilation and Storm King's Thunder. So you see a few little references there. And that's what's nice in 5th edition is a lot of these big, sprawling campaigns, there's always usually a tiny bit of connective tissue that the designers have woven in between them so that you can sort of see how um, these storylines are a little bit interconnected and how they weave together as part of the overall world in which they are set. And then we get into a little bit of history, which is really not a whole lot of history here. And if you just look at this, you think, wow, is there not that much to her? But there's a little clue when you go in here. And that is if you look at this little block for her statistics, 5th edition stats, well, it also tells you that she appears in 4th edition, 3rd edition, 2nd edition, and 1st edition. Now, I'll be honest, I couldn't find the resources that they talked about for her being in the 4th edition, so I don't have any information on that. But I do have the resources that they talked about for her as an AD&D or 1st edition, and then 2nd edition, and then 3rd edition power. And if we go back and look into this history, you can see how she has changed. And you can see how if you're homebrewing Aural, how you have so much leeway to just pull from all these different variations of Aural to decide how you want to present her to your players. So Aural is a goddess of cold, demi-power in Pandemonium. And then, in 1st edition, all you get is this little bitty paragraph about her. A bit about her symbol, and then the fact that she is a beautiful blue-skinned maiden garbed in a mantle of white, connected with Talos. Her personal powers include double-strength cold spears such as Ice Storm and Alaluk's Freezing Spear, and an icy breath that kills plants on contact, and has the effect of a successful crystal brittle spell on all metal it touches. So Now, those are all references to spells out of first edition. We're not going to go into those, but you can see it's just like a little sketch in first edition. Well, now let's take a look at second edition in the Face and Avatars uh, resource book. And this one, by the way, is Cyclopedia of the Realms from first edition, if you're interested in looking that up. Now, Faith and Avatars, uh, we get a little bit more information about her. Her portfolio, aliases, domain name, superior, allies, foes, so the deities that oppose her, a bit more about her symbol, and the alignment of her worshippers. And then you kind of have some of the similar information we saw in fifth edition. You could tell they went back here and mined some of this to give her the description in fifth edition. And when portrayed, Auril appears similar to her Frostmaiden avatar. Well, what is this avatar? Well, this is one of the cool things about second edition. They give you statistics for her avatar. So Auril's avatar is a 27th level mage, 20th level fighter, 15th level cleric. So that means if you're going to go fight her, she is as powerful as a single PC that has attained all of those levels, which means she's pretty darn powerful. Her skin is blue, hair is long, free-flowing, and white. Fine gown of white lawn, thickly furred with frost swirls about her. And here's a few differences in second edition. It says armor class -2, and you think, wow, that's a bad armor class. No. Back in the old days, the lower the armor class, the better. So armor class -2 was really good. She moves at 150 feet. So her walking speed is 150 feet, and she flies at 150 feet as well. She has 201 hit points. She can hit armor class 0 with a roll of 1 on a d20. So that means that she can't miss an armor class 0 even on a botch. She gets 5 attacks every 2 rounds. And she fights with an ice axe or a frost brand, which is similar to, instead of a flaming sword, it's a cold wielding sword. And she's 60% resistant against magic. So any spell you cast at her, she has a 60% to completely ignore even before she gets a saving throw. And then she gets paladin spells, 8 first, 8 second, 6 third, 6 fourth, 4 fifth, 2 sixth, and 1 7th level paladin spells. And then for wizard spells, she gets 6 first, 6 second, 6 third, 6 fourth, 6 fifth, 6 sixth, 6 seventh, 5 eighth, and 5 ninth. So, yeah, just imagine going up against somebody that has that kind of magical arsenal, plus has, kind of a deity's template. Now, we're not going to go through all of this, but I want you to see how from first edition to second edition, you have such a huge write-up now. Very detailed information on her special attacks. Details on her other manifestations, so other ways that she can be sensed or that her worshippers see or feel her in the world. Very detailed information about her church and her clergy. The clergy are clerics, specialty priests, and shamans, and their alignment, whether they're able to turn undead, or whether they're able to command undead. So, let's see. Then something about the dogma of the church, the day to day activities of the clergy, the holy days and the important ceremonies, the major centers of worship. Uh, and then going on to the next page here, affiliated orders, priestly vestments, and adventuring garb. And then what's really cool in this second edition is that it tells you specifically what spells are bonus spells for clergy of Auril. So um, it tells you what your requirements are to be uh, a clergy. Constitution of 13, Wisdom of 12, your your prime requisites, or your in fifth edition, what would be the two statistics that you get proficiency in would be Constitution and Wisdom. Your alignment has to be neutral evil, and then all of these other features that you get uh, to start off with, and then third, fifth, eighth, 10th, 12th, and so on. And then you have a list of all the spells that they get. So at first level, they get this Frost Fingers. Second level, they get Frost Whip. Fourth level, they get Ice Blade. And then seventh level, they get Heart of Ice. Now, why are we going through all of these? Well, because echoes of these still exist in 5th edition in the monster that you will find in Rime of the Frostmaiden, known as Auril the Frostmaiden. Okay, now we go to 3rd edition. And Auril is known as Frostmaiden, Ice Dawn, or the Cold Goddess. We have a picture of her holy symbol here. And then a depiction of her in artwork here. She's a fickle, vain, evil deity with a heart of ice who's venerated primarily out of fear. Remains untouched by any hint of true love, noble feeling, or honor. So you look at each edition of the game, you're going to find slightly different things that you can draw from if you're going to make this a homebrew deity or pattern a homebrew deity off of her. Uh, you have some information about her uh, relationships with other deities. Auril is one of the deities of fury, along with Malar, Umberlee, and her superior Talos. And then the dogma, cover all the lands with ice, quench fire wherever it is found. Let in the winds and the cold, cut down windbreaks and chop holes in walls and roofs, that my breath may come in. So yeah, she's a very, very nasty, nasty deity in terms of her attitude. All right, and now we finally go to Rime of the Frostmaiden and look at the uh, specific information on her as she appears in 5th edition. So a lot of the similar description of the deity and some notes on role playing the deity. Uh, so here's a few suggestions that the developers of the game offer. As long as she has mortal worshippers, she can't, or as long as she has mortal worshippers, Auril can't truly die. She can be defeated in her third form and, in air quotes, be dead until the winter solstice. So there's no reason for her to ever capitulate to mortals' demands. And she's the embodiment of winter's cruelty, so she's incapable of showing mercy or compassion. play her as a supremely cold and unfeeling entity. Have her speak only when necessary. The less she talks, less risk you have of unintentionally demystifying them, the deity in the eyes of your players. And lesser gods in a D&D multiverse are extremely powerful and arrogant, but also fallible and blind to their own flaws. And that is a key to having her be someone that mortal PCs could face on the field of battle. If she were truly invulnerable and truly invincible, there would be no way that even 20th level PCs could survive an encounter with her. As we'll see, she's a challenge for PCs considerably lower than that, but still, because of her knowledge that she can't ever really be permanently defeated by mortals, she is going to always act as though she is that invincible person. And it talks about her lair actions. So there's a frozen island in the icebergs on the Sea of Moving Ice, and she's got, that is considered her lair. So all of these things that she understands, she knows that. The health and location of every other creature on the island. She can teleport any place on the island, and she can telepathically communicate with any number of creatures at once, provided that they're all on the island. So she could communicate with them to command them to defend her or to threaten them if they are her enemies or whatever. And then this is this goes into the stat blocks for her 3 forms. So this is kind of what we want to look at. And we're going to talk about the challenge of presenting her to a party because of the fact that it's one enemy, but it's actually 3 successive enemies. And some of the things that you want to do as a DM to really make this fight feel like an epic fight for your players. All right, so her first form, we said that's this 7-foot tall creature, bipedal creature. Armor class 13, not so impressive. 95 hit points. Tough, but not all that tough. Walking speed of 30, flying speed of 60. She's a divine being, has divine rejuvenation, not because she regenerates hit points, but because she changes to form. And then she's got innate spell casting. She can use that Misty Step at will, Chromatic Orb, Cold Orb only, at will, and Detect Magic at will. She's got Legendary Resistance, 2 per day in this form. So every form has several castings of Legendary Resistance. So that's another thing that makes her very difficult, is that she can just choose to succeed on saving throws, and a lot of really tough creatures get 3 of those. She gets significantly more than 3. So it will cause your party spellcasters to waste a lot of spells or waste a lot of effects that force her to do saving throws before they even have a chance of landing anything. She can attack with her talons and a touch of frost, or she can hurl a chromatic orb. Now, the talons are only +7 to hit, but this touch of frost and chromatic orb, she gets +13 to hit with those. So it's very, very tough. You have to have a very high armor class for her to miss you on a regular basis. She's also got legendary actions in all 3 forms. So Uh, and legendary actions, in case you haven't dealt with those, that's actions that she can take at the end of another creature's turn during combat. So she gets all of her own actions on her turn, and then she gets her reaction. But then, in addition to her own reaction, at the end of somebody else's turn, she can use one of these legendary actions. And those legendary actions recharge at the start of her turn. So you want to use all of those every round to really make it feel like this is an epic enemy. Um, so probably what she's probably going to open with something like Ice Storm, when which is a large area of effect, level 4 spell, and it's going to deal 2d8 damage to everybody in that area. All right. In her second form, this is where she becomes a 10-foot tall woman made of ice and snow. You see, in this form, she gets armor class 16, so now she's a little tougher. She also has 136 hit points, so she's got more hit points. She loses the flying, but she's still got a walking speed of 30 feet. Um, and then she still has 2 more legendary resistances. So she resisted 2 things in her first form. Now she can, just automatically make a saving throw twice in this form. Now she attacks in this form with an Ice Morning Star or with Ice Darts. And the Morning Star is +7 to hit. The Ice Darts are also +7 to hit. But then she has that Cone of Cold. You remember back when we were looking at her history? One of the things they talked about was her Cone of Cold ability. Well, here it is. It shows up again. She blasts a Cone of Cold from her hand in a 60-foot cone, and the saving throw is a DC 21 Constitution saving throw. So that's what tells you that you're dealing with a divine being, is a super high saving throw against these things. She can also create 3 ice methods in this form. So one of the things that she is going to probably do the instant she gets into this form is she is going to toss out those ice methods, and then if she's within 60 feet, she's going to blast one or more enemies with that Cone of Cold. That'll be right off the bat that she will do that. And then she's got this ice stasis. Gem-sized ice crystal that hovers in a space within 5 feet. Then she can target an enemy, force them to make a DC 21 charisma save. If they fail, they get trapped inside that ice gem. So now she's taking enemies off of the battlefield. And it kind of gets worse than that, because when they're in the gem, they are stunned, which means they can't take any actions or reactions, and then they automatically start taking cold damage at the beginning of every one of their turns. They do get, at the end of every one of their turns, they get another charisma save. If they make that save, the gem shatters and they break out of it. But they've probably already taken quite a bit of damage by that time. So that's another thing she can open with as soon as she goes into her second form. Like if there's been somebody that's been dealing a lot of damage in the first form, that's probably the one she's going to target and get that sucker off the battlefield. And now the rest of the party has to worry, well, what happened to the barbarian, or what happened to the paladin, or what happened to whoever. And again, in this form, she gets legendary actions. Ice Flurry and Splinter. So Every creature with the Ice Flurry, every creature within 30 feet just takes 2d4 piercing damage, and she can explode with the Splinter. She can explode an ice method and have that deal shrapnel damage as it explodes. So 3d8 piercing damage for that. And then last but not least, we have her third form, called Winter's Womb or the Queen of Frozen Tears by her followers. And in this form, the armor class goes up again. Now it's 19, still 136 hit points. She doesn't have any walking speed. She just flies around and she hovers. Um, and then as long as she has 1 hit point in this form, every creature within 10 feet takes 10 cold damage at the start of each of Auril's turns. So that means that she's going to be dealing passive damage to anyone in melee range of her. She's got legendary resistance again, and she's got a polar ray attack, plus 13 to hit and 46 cold damage out to 120 feet. And she can do that twice every round. She can create a blizzard veil, magical blizzard, 30-foot radius, centered on herself, heavily obscured, and that sphere moves with Auril. Now that veil doesn't deal any damage in and of itself, but it just gives, because it's heavily obscured, it gives all the disadvantages of being in a heavily obscured area, which I think that gives you that may give you disadvantage on your attack rolls. So that's a thing that you have to deal with. And also 3 legendary actions. Uh, Intensify Aura. The Frigid Aura deals an extra 10 cold damage until the end of her next turn. And the Blinding Gleam. Every creature within 10 feet of her must succeed on a DC 17 Wisdom save or be blinded for a minute. And so you can bet that one of the first things she's going to do, if there's anybody in melee range with her when she goes into this form, she's going to set off that blinding gleam, try to give them disadvantage, which she will then have advantage on her attacks against them. And also will be able to probably escape the battle more easily. But the other thing to notice about these forms is that first form is CR9, second form CR10, third form CR11. So the challenge as a DM is when you're throwing this creature at a party, it's not the same as throwing 3 CR10 enemies at them, because they're not fighting all 3 forms at the same time. They're fighting all 3 forms in succession. So you can sort of butter them up by tossing that first form out at them. And a lot of parties are going to try to deal as much damage as they can early and get a monster down. Well, if they start using their high spell slots early on in the battle, then they waste those against that first form. They also waste those against some of her legendary resistance that she can automatically choose to succeed instead of fail on a saving throw. And then as she gets to her second and third forms, which are more powerful, then she can kind of turn the table against an unwise party that has gone and blown a lot of their heavy abilities early in the battle. So that's something to keep in mind if you're running this. If you're running this monster. Now we're going to go back and look a little bit more at some of the things about Auril. All right, we talked about her very unusual three forms to the combat. So, how would you create a hard encounter with this creature for a party of 5 PCs? Now, I used CR10 as the baseline. So, for a level 6 or level 7 party, a single CR10 monster would be a hard encounter at level 6 or level 7. Um, Now, if you just go with that and you throw this at a level 7 party, it might wind up being overwhelming because that they're having to take on 2 more forms of the monster after they get done with the first one. So a level 8 or 9 party would normally be a medium encounter, but it's probably really more challenging for a level 8 or level 9 party because of those 3 forms that she goes through. And then for a level 10 to level 13 party, a CR10 monster normally would be easy, but it's probably going to be tougher than that because of the fact that you have those 3 forms in a row that you have to go through and fight. All right. Now, if you're a group of PCs and you come up against Auril, what are some tactics that you can use to fight against her? Well, in every single form, she's immune to cold and poison damage. So don't use any cold-based spells or cold-based abilities or poison-based spells or abilities because they won't do you any good. She's immune to being charmed, exhausted, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, or stunned. So don't worry about any abilities that can do that. They won't help you at all. She cannot be surprised and cannot be polymorphed against her will. The reason is she's a deity. That's one of the divine things in D&D. Deities cannot be polymorphed against their will. They can't be surprised. She has true sight, which means not only can she see invisibility, but she can see through any kind of illusion or any kind of altered form out to 120 feet. She's got a legendary resistance, magic resistance, legendary action. Her first form, she is vulnerable to radiant damage. So if you have some radiant weapons or some spells or abilities that deal radiant damage, using those against her in the first form could be especially effective. But that vulnerability changes with each form. So you want to make sure that if you're going up against her, you want to try to have a diversity of energy types in your party that you can use against this creature. The first form has innate spell casting and teleportation. So you've got to watch out for her just being able to bounce across the battlefield and, go and hit this enemy, and then instead of running away and giving you an attack of opportunity, just being able to teleport away. And she can prevent an opponent from taking reactions until its turn with the touch of frost attack. So she can hit you with a touch of frost when you're in melee with her, and then she can move away normally, and you can't get any opportunity attacks because she's preventing you from using your reaction. Now in the second form, she is able to create ice methods, use that cone of cold, trap or freeze an enemy in a crystal of ice, like we talked about. And then in terms of her vulnerability, in the second form, she is vulnerable to fire. So if you can use fire against her in the part of the fight when you're going against the second form, that's particularly effective. The third form, we talked about how she deals passive cold damage in melee range, obscuring blizzard, blinding light, and in the third form, she is vulnerable to thunder damage. So, radiant in the first form, fire in the second form, thunder in the third form. So those are some vulnerabilities you can use against Auril if you wind up fighting her um, in a battle. Um, so that would be something to keep in mind. All right, now if you're a DM and you want to throw Auril the Frostmaiden against your party as a DM, you want to be aware of those vulnerabilities. If certain PCs have those different energy types, you want to use her mobility on the battlefield to keep her away from those PCs that have those particular forms during each particular stage of the battle. Um, Use battlefield teleportation in Form 1 to your advantage. She's a goddess, so it's acceptable for her to have foreknowledge of her enemy's strengths and weaknesses. In Form 1, stay away from PCs with radiant energy, weapons, or spells. Avoid those with fire in the second form, and avoid those with thunder in the third form as much as possible. And open with the biggest attack immediately in each form. Um, she's very unusual in having multiple forms, so use that to her ability. Know that your PCs are bent on getting her down. Don't don't wait until the PCs are weakened to hit them with your biggest attack. Do that right out of the gate. Uh, Consider that Auril would likely try to lure PCs into an area that suits her for the fight. Use the terrain to her advantage. Think about the fact that, again, because she's a goddess, she would probably set things up where she could have parts of the domain where she chooses to fight the enemies, where she could collapse, like big pieces of ice wall, or she could cause an avalanche to come down because of, maybe she has an ally somewhere nearby that can set off some sort of thunder ability that would cause an avalanche. Uh, she's a deity. Don't under, don't make her wimpy. Even though she's a minor deity, she's still a deity. Make your characters, make your players earn a victory if they are going to get a victory over this entity. Every form gets progressively tougher in both challenge rating and armor class. While the first form is appropriate as a hard encounter for level 6 PCs, if you throw Auril at a level 6 party, it's probably going to be a TPK because um, it's going to be tough enough for them to survive the first form. Then when that second form comes in, that's probably going to knock a couple of them down to unconscious, and then that third form might just finish them off. So you may want to, wait until at least level 8 or perhaps even level 9 before you try to have a party face Auril the Frostmaiden. Okay, so where would you put Auril? Well, we know from the lore she's native to the Sea of Moving Ice in the Forgotten Realms. So that's where she lives. That's where she's at home. And so you would wind up wanting to wanting to uh, put her in a realm similar to that, even if you are going to even if you are going to wind up then using her in a homebrew setting or a homebrew campaign. So if you're not in the Forgotten Realms, find some part of your world, the frozen tundra, the polar ice caps, something like that, where she might be. And you know, in the Forgotten Realms, she's a goddess of cruelty and wrath. But in another world, in another type of campaign, she might be a goddess that's more like a vengeful spirit of nature. Imagine, a lot of DMs, they like to look at the headlines for inspiration to do their campaigns. So think of a world that is, where maybe the use of magic is messing with the balance of the climate and the environment. Uh, so maybe Auril is, the spirit of nature, rising up and rebelling against people in a certain area that are really messing with um, the normal climate of that area. And maybe normally that used to be a cold area, but they've come in and tried to make it warm. Well, now it's cold with a vengeance because of Arl being nearby and harassing this civilization or this area. So that's a potential way that uh, you could use this deity in a homebrew setting. Uh, what about reskinning? How could you take the template of Auril and reskin it as something else? Well, this is where we go back to the fact that two of her forms are elemental. Gives us a great set of choices that we can do. We can simply change her from being an entity that is aligned with cold and maybe make her an enemy or an entity, I should say, that is aligned with the elemental plane of air. So perhaps having lightning and thunder damage, if you will. She might be aligned with the plane of earth, where everything in her arsenal would be related to acid damage. And then she might also be aligned with fire, the elemental plane of fire. So, of course, her energy source and all of her damage would be fire based. So, what you would do is you would just change the power source and the damage type that she deals to the appropriate damage type for that plane, and then flip the vulnerabilities to be something that would make sense. So for the fire entity, she might be vulnerable to cold. For the lightning and thunder, she might be vulnerable to acid or to fire, so on and so forth. Uh, for the um, for the earth, she might be vulnerable to cold or water based attacks, something like that. All right. So let's see. Now, do we have any questions so far here? Reminds me of the owl librarian from the Avatar of the Last Airbender. Yes, that is a definite. She definitely harkens back to that, doesn't she? Makes you feel a little bit that way. All right, I'm going to give you guys a chance to think of any questions that you might have. I'm going to go on into the wrap up here, and then we'll come back and take a look at chat and see if there are any further questions. All right, so thank you guys for hanging out tonight. Um, this has been Monster Monday. I've been DM Gallibond. I am on this Twitch channel 4 times a week. Monday is my only one mic show. I'm back on Thursday night for the Sword Coast Chronicles, 8 p.m. We are doing a homebrew campaign that weaves in and out of the storylines of the published 5th edition adventures. Then on Saturday night, we're doing a playthrough of the Lost Mine of Phandelver, but we're using the original D&D rule set. So the basic edition all the way back from the 1970s, just as Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson created it. Much different game. We've had multiple character deaths, and when characters die, they just die. There's no death saves. There's no going to zero and being able to bring them back, stabilize them, or anything like that. If you hit zero in that edition, you're just dead. And then on Sundays, we have the Walker of Waterdeep campaign, a 5th edition Planeswalking campaign. And then, of course, Monday night, we have Monster Monday. Okay, so, yeah, this one as a Fey boss would be kind of cool. Very, very much so. And the fact that she is depicted as having some Fey worshippers and some alignments there among the Fey people is very telling as well. All right. Well, if there are no questions, we're going to go ahead and thank you guys for being here tonight. And remember, as always, when we sign off, watch out for the monsters under the bed. Good night, everyone. All right, tonight, since we are now part of the Game Rebel Network, we are going to go ahead and we're going to find somebody from Game Rebel. And we're going to let you guys go on over there and hang out with them for the rest of the evening. So let's pull up